family. Welcome back to Starkey Farmsteads. My name is Samantha. Cover so many topics, guys. We're going to talk in depth in this video about the Department of Education and what does it mean when they say they're going to dismantle it? What does it mean? Children who have special needs and children on free and reduced lunches. So we're going to break that down in this video. What we're mainly going to focus on is this push of tech billionaires buying up rural America. And what does that look like? What does that mean for people like you and me? What does it mean for our property taxes? What does it mean for our land use? What does it mean for our small rural communities that we love so much? That's why we've chosen this life. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about politics in the world in general. I will say this. If you guys have not watched what J.D. Vance said in Munich, Germany yesterday, you should take a minute out and go listen to the Vice President of the United States. Hey, Kent Fraud. Good morning, everybody. So let's start like this. We all heard the rumors of Bill Gates purchasing vast amounts of land in Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, right? Along the Mississippi Delta. And then he's got, land in Texas, and he's got all this land. We also know that Bill Gates is pushing fake meat. There's no other word for it. It's fake meat. So it goes to you have to ask the question, why are you investing in farmland specifically if you want to stop seeing us eat real food and go to fake food? Like what do you have, but what is your ulterior motive is what I'm asking, because you have to ask that question. Then I found that the movie Yellowstone is more real than I ever thought it could be. What am I talking about? There's actually a club of billionaires called the Yellowstone Club. Oh, yeah, shale cores. That's right, Salt Shaker. They do buy up all new available property in certain areas. Well, I started doing a little digging, and I realized that there is a group of billionaires that go by the name Yellowstone Group, right? It's a club of multi-billion and millionaire people buying up land in Montana. And it's exclusive. You're only getting in if you own land in the area or a home or a condo. You have to pay extreme amounts of money. And you ask the question, why are they doing it? So that they can have their own mountain.
Are expensive and very time consuming and secretive.
Ben Ryder Howe spent 2 years in pursuit of answers surrounding the crazy mountain land exchange.
One of the aspects of the deal that was kept from the public was the cost.
According to his article in New York Magazine, a private party financed the bulk of the transaction costs. And in that party are 900 of the most influential people, including Melinda French Gates and Tom Brady. They call themselves the Yellowstone Club. And
the Yellowstone Club. And they're basically finagling with the federal government on land swaps in Montana, affecting people like you and I without our consent. But this is not the only place it's happening. Last year, Stephen and I did a video on a billionaire that bought up an entire town in Arkansas called Wilson. Now, here's the thing. When you look it up, it'll tell you Galen Lawrence Jr. bought Wilson, Arkansas in 2010 for $110 million. The town had been owned by the Wilson family for 125 years. Why did he buy Wilson? Well, to revitalize the town into a hub for culture, art, education, food, and history. To rebrand Wilson as a luxury tourist destination. So Stephen and I, good morning, everyone. Stephen and I went to Wilson, Arkansas. We have a video on it, and we stayed in the Wilson. Now, the Wilson is an exclusive hotel, but one of the things that I noticed when we stayed there was that they had bomb-proof doors, like blast doors. They were like this thick. To go up in the elevator, you had to have a key cord. So you could go into the bar area and the registration desk, but that was as far as you could go without a key card. Once you went up the elevator to where all the rooms were, you could go outside. And this hotel had its own power. It had its own AC. It had its own water and its own sewage. It basically was a place where the rich could stay and be safe regardless of what was going on in the world. You could even grow food, and they were on top of the hotel. And I remember telling my husband, I wonder how many more places like this are around the United States that people just don't even know. You're just driving through a rural town without realizing some billionaire came in and bought it and has a bunker style hotel hidden in the heart of town. It was a very interesting trip we took. It's called the Lewis. It's a 16 hotel room, 16 rooms. That's it. There's an organic farm and a Wilson cafe. He even established an independent school. It's crazy. It's crazy what he's done. But this guy owns 165 acres of farmland in Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi. He has 5 banks, and he's the world's largest privately owned air conditioning distributor in the world. So as I was digging into this, because I really was just curious, why are they investing millions of dollars to buy up entire towns, all the farmland in areas, and it's just a small group of billionaires doing it? Well, folks, as always, if you ask, you will find out.
Really crazy going on in the part of the Bay Area that I grew up in, and it's only now starting to get mainstream media attention.
California.
Solano County, which is just north of the East Bay. A couple of years ago, my dad started telling me about this thing that was happening, where some really shady sounding company was offering people massive amounts of money to sell their farmland. These are mostly small family owned farms. They don't make a lot of money, and they've been there for generations. So this group was offering people way too much money for their land. When people didn't want to sell, they started suing the hell out of them. So these are small farmers being sued by this weird venture capital sounding organization, and they have no idea where the money is coming from or who's even suing them. And then it comes out that the people who are trying to buy up all this farmland and sue these small farmers, some of the most powerful and wealthy Silicon Valley billionaires, including the co-founder of LinkedIn, Steve Jobs' wife. Some of the richest people you can imagine are buying up acres and acres of farmland in seemingly the middle of nowhere. Like, this is the boony. And once people find this out, they go from a really secretive organization to a massive public campaign called California Forever. So far, they've bought 62,000 acres of land in Solano County, and what they want to do with it is build a city completely planned with dense housing and public transportation, all that good stuff. But in order to build the city, they need to pass a ballot referendum in November. They've started paying all these canvassers to go out and talk to people, but these canvassers have been deliberately lying to people about what they're signing, saying that they're signing petitions for affordable housing or funding Medicare, even things like fighting the fentanyl crisis in the Bay Area. They're just straight up lying to people, suing people, causing havoc left and right. California Forever is trying to argue that this project will help eliminate the housing crisis in California, and here's why that's totally wrong. Now, NIMBYism sucks, but just building new stuff isn't really going to help anyone if there's no guarantee that that will be affordable housing. The idea that California's housing crisis is a result of not having enough units for people to live is a complete lie. There were 60,000 vacant units in San Francisco. The problem is not that there aren't places for people to be. The problem is that they can't afford to be there. It's a completely manufactured crisis from greedy landlords and private equity firms like BlackRock. We should be building more dense, affordable housing in California California, but California's housing crisis is not a result of not having enough places for people to live. It's a product of poverty. We know this because what contributed to the skyrocketing rates of homelessness in the Bay Area in the aftermath of the pandemic wasn't that people were fighting for housing units in San Francisco. It was actually the opposite, that a lot of people left San Francisco because their jobs went remote. The economy basically left with them. A lot of businesses and restaurants closed because their customer base had left, and the people that were left behind couldn't find work that paid them a livable wage, and they couldn't find affordable housing. Not because there weren't places for them to live, but because all of our housing stock is owned by private equity firms, just like the one trying to build this utopian city in Solano County. We want to end. There's something really great
surrounding it. Welcome to Winnemucca. The city became a central shipping point to mines after the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. Silver ore and gold were discovered through the 19th and 20th centuries, boosting the town's population and economy. And now, a new discovery will change this place.
Lithium.
It won't just be a stop in the road on the way to Burning Man.
Okay, I'm heading about 60 miles north of Winnemucca right now to an area called Thacker Pass, the epicenter of lithium mining, not just in the McDermott caldera, but in all of America and kind of the world. About 15 miles from Thacker Pass, I lost cell service like about 15 miles ago, so we are off the grid. You see, Thacker Pass has a very specific type of clay called illite clay. That illite clay has an incredibly high concentration of lithium in it. The area was known to have mercury, gold, uranium, and gallium enrichments, but the behemoth now is lithium. And that makes Thacker Pass one of the most important plots of land in America right now. There's an estimated $3.9 billion worth of lithium back there. And the entire McDermott caldera is estimated to hold $1.5 trillion of lithium, making it the largest reserve in the world. Seems like a win-win, right? But it's much more complicated than that. If you look into this story, one of the first things you'll find are the indigenous tribes that are protesting the mine. The Paiute and Shoshone tribes consider Thacker Pass sacred, a site where their ancestors were massacred on two separate occasions, one being by the U.S. Cavalry in 1865. And they have appealed and protested at multiple points throughout the process, even bringing it all the way to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where ultimately it was approved.
It was approved. That's Nevada.
Is the most exclusive. Yellowstone Club is the most exclusive membership club in the world. People pay tens of millions of
This
dollars.
is Montana.
A private ski and golf resort, and it's in Big Sky, Montana, on 15,000 acres. Membership is capped at 914 to prevent overcrowding. Mark Zuckerberg is one of the many billionaire founders who just happen to have a home there. If you'd like to join, it's $300,000 for the initiation fee, $36K in annual dues, a few other added fees in there too. And in order to join, you need to own property here. Homes start at around $20 million. Per usual, I want to talk a little bit about business here. I'm most interested in their ownership and funding history. The original owner was this timber entrepreneur named Tim Blixaff. I could do a whole video on him. He's a very interesting character, to say the least. He did a brief stint in jail for hiding millions of dollars. He had this ambitions to build this high-end timeshare at the Yellowstone Club, but the company went bankrupt during the financial crisis. So then a private equity firm called Cross Harbor swoops in and buys Yellowstone Club for $115 million. That was in 2009, and today Yellowstone Club is worth billions. Over the last decade, Cross Harbor has been buying a ton of Big Sky real estate. I'm Sammy, covering all things Wall Street and culture. So
Now let's get to Texas. Wait, let me find Texas for you guys.
Business Journal. Bert Tito Beveridge, the founder of Tito's Vodka, another billionaire, has been buying land left and right in Bastrop County. Tito has made purchases dating back to 2021, nearing 13,000 acres of land with an assessed value of nearly $156 million, according to the Bastrop County tax records. So the question is, what are they planning on doing with all of this land?
So that is the question.
Tito Beveridge.
What do you guys think? I just showed you Nevada, Montana, California, Arkansas, Texas. It's happening everywhere. It's happening in Hawaii, where land is like, I mean, it's an island. For the love of God, you can't, it's just so much. There's something going on. Hello, Roberta. There's so much going on that we are missing with these billionaires, these millionaires, and these equity firms with their purchasing of land. Now, I saw something extremely interesting last night, and I want you guys to do your own research. I want you all to type in houses for sale in Washington, D.C., the D.C. area. Houses have, like, it is 10 times the amount of houses up for sale right now, today, than it was a month ago. Houses going up for sale everywhere, all over the place in DC. So my question is, why? Well, for one, because Trump is demanding that people come back into the office. Why is it only 6% of the federal employees actually show up to work? They work from home. That is not okay. That's not what we are paying you to do. We want you in the office, fully clothed. And their complaints are, well, now I have to find daycare. Well, you're already making more than the average American who has to have daycare for them. If it's good for the gander, it's good for the goose. But all of a sudden, in the DC area, houses are for sale everywhere. I'm just saying, what's going on? So guys, please make sure that you hit the like button, that you are subscribed still. It does help push this video out to people. Now, I want to talk to you about the Department of Education. A lot of people were complaining. Okay, so you guys know I have a background in education. In fact, I have a master's in education. I taught in public school systems for 7 years. I ran a Class A daycare for a year with 1,000 children and 30 employees. I have seeded a Montessori school, and I have been a homeschool educator for homeschool children. So I've dabbled in all the different ways that you can do education. Okay. I am for the dismantling of the Department of Education. My sister, who has recently retired from a position in a school board in Louisiana, was real hesitant. And she's like, how can you be for this, Sam? What about the children with special needs? I said, they're still going to get their services. Like, they're going to get their services. The only difference is we're taking the federal government out of controlling the Department of Education and putting it back into the hands of the states, right? Which is how it's supposed to be, folks. So I have a really good explanation and breakdown of the entirety of what is going on. Let me find it for you guys, because it is super, super good. And I want you to hear this. Well, I got to find it. Give me a second. So you guys tell me, are you in agreement or against the Department of Education being dismantled? I would like to know what you guys think.
You heard that they're trying to abolish the Department of Education and you're a little worried. I decided to go ahead and print out the bill that was presented to abolish the Department of Education and read through it, research a little bit, because there's a lot of fear mongering going around, a lot of false statements being shared. And I was like, you know what? Why not try to just read through it with you guys? Not to change your mind, just to give you facts straight off the press of what this bill looks like and the goal behind some of this stuff. So first and foremost, there's a lot being shared right now about the Department of Education and the Child Nutrition Program. I just want to be upfront about this one. The Child Nutrition Program is not paid out by the Department of Education. This is actually managed by the Department of Agriculture. So honestly, the Child Nutrition Program has nothing to do with the Department of Education. And so it's not even included in the conversation about the Department of Education.
So let me tell you what she just said. People were saying, well, what about, my kids get free and reduced lunches. My kids get free and reduced breakfast. My kids get summer SNAP benefits. If you dismantle the Department of Education, are we going to lose those benefits? Are the states going to make our children pay for food now? No, because the Department of Education never had anything to do with free and reduced lunches. This goes to show how many people do not understand how the government works. The USDA, they control lunch programs for public schools. They control free and reduced lunches, summer food programs, and breakfasts for children in public schools, not the Department of Education. It's two totally different things. But when you get on TikTok, you hear people saying, but if you dismantle the Department of Education, children will go hungry. That is not only ignorant, it's lazy. It's lazy on the part of the person saying it, that they made the assumption that the money came from the Department of Education. Nope. As a school teacher, I can assure you, when you're filling out those forms for free and reduced lunches, it says USDA on it, not DOE. Facts do matter.
Now, this act will be cited as the Returning Education to Our States Act. This would be effective on the date that is 180 days after the date of enactment of this act. The Department of Education would be abolished with the exception of the programs transferred under Section 3. So let's look into Section 3. What programs will still be alive, just transferred to different departments, okay? Moving down to Section 3, transfer of certain departments of education programs. This is where the meat and potatoes of this is going to be. So if you were kind of paying attention, but not fully listening, this is where you turn your ears on and you actually listen to what I'm about to say. All right. So all functions, programs, and authorities of the Secretary of Education under the Individuals with Disability Education Act shall be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services. This is your IEPs, your early intervention, your special education grants, your free special education services. Those all will just be moving to the Department of Health and Human Services. Then moving down, each authority and program of the Office of Indian Education of the Department of Education shall be transferred to the Department of Interior. Those are programs designed for Native Americans, specifically in their education. There's a lot of programs there. You can look them up if that's applicable to you or you're worried about those programs. They are there, okay? Now, moving on to each Impact Aid program under Title 8 of Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 shall be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services. This includes the financial assistance that local education agencies get that lose property tax revenue due to the presence of federally connected students. So those who live on Indian lands, have military family or parents, those in federally low rent housing, those types of situations. This is where all of that falls, and it will just be moving to the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, another big one that people are freaking out about, okay? Federal Pell Grant Program, Federal Family Education Loan Program, William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program, Federal Perkins Loan Programs, all not going anywhere. They're still going to be alive and well, just moving to the Department of Treasury. Then, the activities described in Part F, G, or H in the Title IV that are carried out by the Department of Education shall be transferred to be carried out by the Department of Treasury. This includes EIR grants, promised neighborhoods, so those neighborhoods that have cradle to career services for high poverty areas, magnet schools to avoid racial division, AP courses for low income students, exam fees, school safety and violence protection, STEM support, mental health services. All of those still alive, still well, moving to the Department of Treasury. The Health Education Assistance Program and the programs under the Education Science Reform Act of 2002 will all also be moving to the Department of Treasury. The Health Education Assistance Loan Program is for healthcare field loans for those that are in the medical field. And then the Education Science Reform Act of 2002 are programs that generate and apply education research to improve teaching, learning, and policies nationwide. Honestly, all of these funds would have been sent out regardless, and you really wouldn't have had any idea where they were coming from. A lot of people are just up in arms now because they've heard that they're trying to abolish the Department of Education, and so that's where the fear-mongering came from. But again, all of these things will
So all those people on social media discussing how horrible this is, end of the world, even teachers, shame on you for getting on social media and trying to fearmonger people less educated than you. Just because they're dismantling the DOE does not mean they're dismantling law or things that have been passed by Congress. They're simply moving them to the appropriate department to carry on as usual and putting education back in the hands of the states where it should have always been. If you know anything about the Constitution, what did we fight the Civil War for? State and federal rights. We fought the Civil War over the federal government extending itself where it wasn't welcome. That was what that's about. This is why America is in so much trouble, because you have people getting on social media, bumping them gums, but they don't know what they're talking about. You're still going to get your free food. Quit complaining. Your kids are still going to eat for free. If your kids are in special needs or have mental issues, they're still getting covered by my tax dollars. The only difference is we're going to save a few $1 billion by trimming out a department that never needed to be, by putting funding to the correct departments like Health and Human Services for mental and special needs. Why do you need the Department of Education for special ed? You already had a department handling that. Put it back where it goes. And let me tell you guys this. Trump didn't create Doge. He took a department, retitled it, and made it do what it was supposed to do. Look it up. It's very interesting when you learn the truth. It really will set you free. Now, let's talk about Lyme disease. I did a video the other day on the nonsense found in all the Girl Scout cookies. So please, for the love of God, do not buy Girl Scout cookies, okay? Just don't. They're dangerous. They're toxic. On top of that, we talked about autism. We talked about Lyme disease and Morgellons disease. And that if you have Morgellons, you do have Lyme. But the real question, and a lot of people don't know this, is that Lyme disease is supposedly something that the federal government created. Okay? It's something the federal government, the military, created.
That Lyme disease is highly likely a materially engineered bioweapon.
I probably did say that.
Did you say that?
And that's what the developer of
I
Lyme
want all
disease
of our colleagues to hear it, Mr. Kennedy. I want them to hear it.
He wants all of his colleagues to hear it. So let's break it down today. Is Lyme disease a genetically engineered bioweapon? My name is James Lee, and you're watching Beyond the Headlines on Breaking Points. The first known cases of Lyme disease were reported in Lyme, Connecticut in the 1970s. But since then, the disease has exploded into a public health crisis, with the CDC estimating nearly 500,000 cases each year in the United States alone. For decades, the official story has been that Lyme disease was naturally occurring, originating from tick bites in the forests of New England. But emerging evidence suggests something far more sinister: government experiments, biological warfare, and a potential cover-up. So to help us unpack the real story, I'm joined today by Kris Newby, an award-winning medical science writer and author of Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. Kris, thank you so much for joining us today on Breaking Points.
Thanks for the invite, James. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. I just have to start with the irony of the whole situation. I'm sure you maybe caught some of this during the RFK Jr. hearing. Senator Michael Bennet, he was grilling RFK saying, "Did you say that Lyme disease came from a lab, blah, blah, blah?" And I've been looking at this, as you know, kind of in the background. I'm thinking to myself, well, I think it maybe did come from a lab. So I think, the government, in order to convince us that a conspiracy doesn't exist, may have just drawn more attention to the possibility that one might exist. So I want to give you that opportunity to kind of lay out your research. You know, we know for a fact that the U.S. government has had a long history of experimenting with biological weapons, and then Plum Island, coincidentally, just
Operation Sea Spray,
short miles away from where Lyme disease was first appeared, was a top secret bioweapons research lab. So what evidence have you found that suggests that Lyme disease did actually come from a lab, and was it perhaps part of a Cold War era bioweapons program?
Well, it hasn't been definitively proven that Lyme disease was engineered and weaponized, but what we know for sure is there was a concerted program, almost as large and secretive as the Manhattan Project, to weaponize fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes. And by weaponize, I mean injecting them, inoculating them with some of the most deadly diseases.
What?
The intent of dropping those insects on an enemy population, a city, to weaken that population and tie up their medical resources so it'd be easier for an invasion to happen. So there is definitive, undeniable proof that we were weaponizing those bugs. Whether or not Lyme was engineered, it hasn't been proven yet, but I wouldn't rule it out, keeping an open mind, because there's some very unusual things about the genome of Willy Burgdorfer, the bacteria that causes Lyme disease.
Yeah, so I know that in the book that you were citing, the Dr. Willy Burgdorfer, I believe his name was, and he was credited with discovering Lyme disease. And my understanding that he made some kind of admissions that came out later on before he died. Can you tell us a little bit about the details of that?
Yes. So what Willy Burgdorfer did in the beginning of the bioweapons program was he took ticks and he would stuff them with multiple viruses and bacterium to meet a military objective. Like, we want a deadly tick bite here, we want an incapacitating tick bite, so it will weaken a population. So it was crude gain of function experiments, because once you mix multiple pathogens in the belly of a tick, viruses like mutate the bacteria. It's what they do. So so he would mix them inside ticks, put them on little rodents, see which rabbits died fast. He would cull that organism from the blood, and then he would send the samples to Fort Detrick, and they would see, can we weaponize this germ? So that sort of happened in the 50s. In the 60s, the military realized, well, it's hard to reliably stuff fleas and ticks and mosquitoes in a bomb and put them on the shelf till you need them. So they went to just brewing the organisms, some of them tick-borne, in a large steel tank, like you would brew beer. Then
or fake meat.
Freeze dry the organisms, make them into dormant spores, and then they would hire a contractor like General Mills, the people that bring you Cheerios, to figure out how to mill them.
Oh my God.
And powderize them so you could spread them over a battalion or a city. So that was the plan. And then the biological weapons program was ended by Nixon in 1972.
Or
Research
was it?
carried on under the umbrella of defense, at Detrick and overseas. So that's pretty well established that those happened. Now, Willy Burgdorfer, the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, recent papers that have genetically sequenced the organism show it has a mysterious and rapid evolution.
Listen.
In scientific terms, that means it doesn't seem like it was a natural evolution.
There it is.
So to me, that supports the theory that perhaps they were mixing the bacteria with viruses to make something more virulent. And certainly that's what we saw on the ground in the early 70s in Lyme disease. I went to the Yale archives and looked at the very earliest symptom reports from Polly Murray, and it was just ghastly how horrible that disease was, with a lot of neurological things that were so unusual. And then the joint swelling. And in the end, when I was interviewing him about the Lyme outbreak, he obviously felt guilty. He said he wouldn't give me details of where and how the release of whatever we call Lyme disease really is, but he said accidents happens. Sometimes experiments don't turn out the way you planned.
Wow.
All right, there you have it. So when you saw the Senate committee grilling Kennedy, they know, you guys, they know they did this. I just really pray. I told my friend this the other day. Americans aren't children. We vote to put you in office. We pay our money from the sweat of our brows to run this country. And you're going to hide every dirty little thing you ever did to us. This is a reckoning. What the American people did when they voted Donald Trump in office was a reckoning. We demand answers. When Trump agreed to put Kennedy in the position Kennedy is in, there was a reason for that.
And seamlessly appointed this as their own
Look at
head
that.
of the Department of Health.
A man dressed as a woman.
The people who saw this as fit, as an image of health, as qualified, criticized and ridiculed this man right here for his own stances on what health looks like. I don't know if this is really registering in the way that it's supposed to. Like, if this isn't clinically, mentally insane, I don't know what is. Now, thank God, this man eked in just like the rest of Trump's
Praise
picks, but
God.
again, thank God, because and seamlessly appointed.
And did you see yesterday, President Trump signed executive order saying schools could not force students to have the C-19 vaccine for them to go to school in public schools. And if they do, it's their right to say, hey, these are the vaccines we want our students to have. But if they try to force your child to take the C-19 vaccine, they no longer get federal funding. Now I'm waiting for the day that he signs the executive order that says if you're a sanctuary city and you hide and house illegal aliens, you will no longer get federal funding. It's coming. It is coming. Because America has had enough, folks. Because this is what Biden's America looked like.
Use is different from both. When we talk about improper payments, they are a subset of those other three categories. But that doesn't tell us the whole picture either. Sometimes improper payments are a function of bad record keeping. Sometimes they are a function of outdated information technology systems. Sometimes they come about through human error, and sometimes they come about through negligence. There are a variety of reasons why improper payments happen. It just simply is not the case that improper payments are only a function of bad people doing bad things with bad intent.
Really? Do y'all know who that was? That was the government oversight director who is legally blind. Now, I'm not saying if you're blind, you can't do a good job, but how are you going to be the oversight? Oversight. In other words, you have to be able to see what people are doing on their computers and at their desk. And you're blind? That's like saying you're going to hire a deaf person to be the orchestra person. That's Biden's America. That's what's wrong with this country.
Tactic. I personally believe that there are no current effective years.
It's ridiculous.
A pilot, after he landed at 1:30 a.m., has just gone viral.
They're tired of you dumping heavy metals all over our county.
Well, I'm not the one to talk to about that.
No, but you are. But you're the one that's doing it. So
For the last several years, she's tracked these flights over to Lyme County, collected over 20 rainwater samples, and filed public records requests revealing hazardously elevated levels of aluminum, barium, strontium, titanium, and magnesium, the very materials they use in their trails, as confirmed by air sample analysis collected up in the sky within the trails themselves.
At great effort and expense, we acquired a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Lyme lab with top scientists in it, took samples at altitude behind heavy aircraft. We sampled what they were emitting. The sample was processed at one of the top testing institutions in the world. We found exactly what we knew we would find.
Fast forward to this week when she claims to have had enough. Using Flight Radar 24, she tracked a Beech C-90 King Air conducting repeated seeding flights over Sonora. She drove to the Modesto Jet Center to confront the pilots directly.
904 DK. That's who that is. He can go himself. At some point, I will get down to the airport. So this is the Modesto Jet Center, okay? Oh my God, that's them. Look at them in the building. They let me in. You're Tim, right?
I'm one of the other captains.
Oh, great. We've been trying to reach you for a long time, and we are tired of you dumping heavy metals all over our county.
Well, I'm not the one to talk to about that.
No, but you are. But you're the one that's doing it. So I've been taking rain samples. I have over 20 samples. And every time you fly, we get high amounts of aluminum, barium, strontium, titanium, magnesium.
You can talk to
I've tried. I've called them, and they're not calling me back. So we're now going to bring something legal against your company. We are real people underneath what you're doing.
When our snow results come back from this certified lab that all of us participated in raising the money to have that unnatural snow tested, I firmly believe in my heart we are going to find heavy metals at extreme levels. It'll take probably another 2, maybe 3 weeks before those results come back. Thousands of dollars in testing. Why? Because unless you can prove it, you're just another crazy person. Unfortunately, that's how it is. So hang in there, patriots, because we're going to get to the truth of this, whether they want us to or not. Also, I found something extremely disturbing. After watching this and continuing to dig into federal law, let me explain something to you guys. January 22nd, 2025, ban atmospheric testing. U.S. federal law allows for weather modification experiments involving the use of human subjects for the testing of chemical or biological agents and open-air testing of chemical and biological agents. The following U.S. federal laws or specific sections therein must be repealed and such activities prohibited. U.S.C. Chapter 9A, Weather Modification. 50 U.S.C. 1520A, experiment or testing of chemical or biological agents on human subjects. 50 U.S.C. 1512, open air testing of biologicals and chemicals. 2 federal laws specifically address weather modification. Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. And the Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976. The term weather modification is defined as any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, and dynamics of the atmosphere. Now, you can find this, and I will put all of this information in the description of this video when it is over. However, it says right here, purpose It is therefore declared to be the purpose of the Congress in this act to develop a comprehensive and coordinated national weather modification policy and a national program of weather modification research and development. 1, to dismantle the means by which deliberate weather modification can be used at the present time to decrease the adverse impact of weather on agriculture, economic growth, and the general public welfare, and to determine the potential for weather modification. 2, to conduct research into those scientific areas considered most likely to lead to practical techniques for drought prevention or alleviation and other forms of deliberate weather modification. 3, to develop practical methods and devices for weather modification. 4, to make weather modification research findings available to interested parties. That would be me. 5, to assess the economic, social, environmental, and legal impact of an operational weather modification program. 6, to develop both the national and international mechanisms designed to minimize conflicts which may arise with respect to the peaceful uses of weather modification. So hold up, Sally. What am I reading? I'm actually reading, you guys have heard me talk about this before. They put out bulletins. It's a federal bulletin. And if you have something called a SAM.gov or a DUNS number, you get these regular. It's basically asking for bids and comments from the public, but most people don't know these exist. And the one I'm happen to be reading from is Title 15, Commerce and Trade, page 661. And in it, it's talking about weather modification. So it says, this is supposed to develop mechanisms designed to minimize conflicts which may arise with respect to the peaceful uses of weather modification. Why, if weather modification is so great, would there be an issue? Because they know it causes problems. It causes floods. It increases the strength of hurricane, hail, tornadoes. Weather modification actually causes droughts. It dumps heavy metals into the soil and onto the people and into the water. Number 7, to integrate the results of existing experience and studies and weather modification activities into model codes and agreements for regulation of domestic and international weather modification activities. In other words, we want to make sure no other country can do it to us here in the United States, but we want to be able to do it to everyone else, just like they did in Vietnam. Wow. The interstate nature of climatic and related phenomena, the severe economic hardships experienced as the result of occasional drought and other adverse meteorological conditions, and the existing role and responsibilities of the federal government with respect to disaster relief require appropriate federal action to prevent or alleviate such disasters and hazards. Weather modification programs may have long-range and unexpected effects on existing climatic patterns, which are not confined by national borders. Excuse me. They admit it. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know. But because of FEMA, they have a right. They have a right because they pay for it. USC 50-1520A, restrictions on use of human subjects for testing, of chemical or biological agents includes requirements for informed consent. A, prohibited activities. The Secretary of Defense may not conduct directly or by contract any test or experiment involving the use of chemical agents or biological agents on civilian populations. 2, any other testing of chemical agents or biological agents on human subjects. Exceptions. Always got exceptions. Including for the following purposes. 1, any peaceful purpose that is related to medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research. Any purpose that is directly related to protection against toxic chemicals or biological weapons and their agents. Any law enforcement purpose, including purposes related to riot control. So what does that mean? It means the Department of Defense doesn't have a right to use you as a guinea pig unless it's for pharmaceutical or agricultural or economic or research, and your local law enforcement can dump chemicals on you if there's a riot that they need to control. You can't make it up. This is what your Congress passed in 1976. Biological agent defined, because they're very specific. You can read it for yourself. Biological means any microorganism, including bacteria, viruses, fungi, rickettsia, never heard of that, or protozoa, pathogen, infectious substance, and any naturally occurring, bioengineered, or synthesized compound of any such microorganism, pathogen, or infectious substance, whatever its origin or method of production, that is capable of causing 1, death, disease, or other biological malfunction in an animal, a human, a plant, or any living organism. 2, deterioration of food, water, equipment, supplies, or materials of any kind. 3, deleterious alteration of the environment. Any peaceful purpose that is related to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity does not have to follow those rules. Oh my God. They even have in here environmental protection and use of facilities section. In carrying out the requirement of subsection A, the Secretary of Defense shall provide for maximum protection for the environment, the general public, and the personnel who are involved in the destruction of the lethal chemical agents and mutations referred to in subsection A, including but not limited to the use of technologies and procedures that will minimize risk to the public at each site. So they're admitting that they're constantly creating bioweapons and they're spraying them, but they don't have to follow their own rules. If it pertains to pharmaceutical, riots, agricultural, yeah. Good Lord. I'm going to put this in description of the video. I hope all of you do your own research. I will tell you this. It's going to make some of you mad, and I don't really care because truth is truth. Reauthorization of Trump's Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act introduced under Biden. So, HR 6093. HR 6903. To improve the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's weather research, support improvements, and weather forecasting and prediction, expand commercial opportunities for the provision of weather data and other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives in the United States in Congress assembled. This act may be cited as the Weather Research and Forecast Innovation Reauthorization Act of 2023. Weather Act Reauthorization Act of 2023. All right, so Biden took something that was Trump's, but see, weather modification didn't stop under Trump's first term. It increased under his and Biden's term. So at some point, we have to get Trump to understand we are against this and we want it to stop. It says in this act, the terms seasonal state, subseasonal, undersecretary, weather enterprise, weather data, and weather industry have been given definitions. They love to define things. You got to learn how to speak the federal government speak if you're going to try to talk to them. The Undersecretary shall ensure the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration remains focused on providing accurate and timely weather forecasts that protect lives and property, whatever. Y'all ready for this? They were given $155 million for 2024. $90 million is authorized for weather laboratories and cooperative institutes. $30 million is authorized for the United States Weather Research Program. $15 million for a joint technology transfer initiative, and $156 million will be earmarked for them in 2025, which $20 million will be for tornado, severe weather, and next generation radar research. Great. Good God. I'm so sick of my government. They want to verification of the origins of rotation in tornadoes experiment. Verification of the origins of rotation in tornadoes experiment vortex. The goal of the program shall be to develop and extend accurate tornado forecast predictions and warnings, to improve the effectiveness and timeliness of tornado forecasts, optimize lead time, transition from warn-on detection to warn-on forecast. Using all kinds of great stuff. Wow. You guys, they just waste our money. They just really waste our money. The goal of the program under subsection A shall be to develop and extend accurate hurricane forecast, improve the understanding and prediction of rapid intensity change and projections of paths, improve forecast and impact-based communication of inland flooding, evaluate and incorporate as appropriate innovative observations such as novel sensor technologies, observation tools or networks, crewed or uncrewed systems, AI, and hosted instruments on commercial aircraft, vessels, and satellites. Wow. Oh, here's a good one. Conduct and transition to operations the research necessary to develop and deploy probabilistic weather forecast guidance technology relating to hurricanes and other weather phenomena. Take that like you want it. I'll put all of this in the description so you guys can do your own research, educate yourself, know what your government is spending your money on. But NOAA needs to be greatly dismantled. It needs to be very small. They need to stop all geoengineering because you and I are going to pay for it. We are paying for it, and it's only going to continue. Now, let's keep going.
For canceling grants and contracts. Nearly $1 billion of wasteful contracts were ripped up yesterday. Like this one, a contractor was paid $1.5 million to observe mailing and clerical operations at one mail center. This guy was observing mail being opened and being sent for $1.5 million. This is the kind of no-show job a mob boss gives their cousin. DOE also terminated 29 DEI training programs at the Department of Education worth over $100 million. That comes to $3.5 million for each training program. Most of you've gone through DEI training programs. You're in with HR for an hour? Maybe it's just an online course. Cha-ching, $3.5 million. What? I should have been a DEI consultant. One DEI session trained teachers to force students to recognize their privilege and their history of oppression. Half the classroom can't read, but this is what they're doing. DOE's just shredded 18 contracts at the Department of Agriculture. One of them was for Central American Gender Assessment Consultant Services. We were paying a guy in El Salvador to assess gender. What does that have to do with agriculture? Here's another one. Forest and Gender Consultant Services in Brazil. Or this, the Women in Forest Carbon Initiative Mentorship Program. You go, girl. Elon says DOE also canceled a $17 million contract to provide tax policy advice to Liberia. $17 million to help Africans do their taxes. We even paid college tuition for Al-Qaeda. We gave a jihadi a full ride to Colorado State. Here's how the shell game works. You get taxed. Congress sends your money to a federal agency. The agency sends it to a Democrat nonprofit. The nonprofit president takes a fat salary, sends some of it to a subcontractor, and donates the rest to Democrats. The whole government's being audited.
That's the truth.
Reaction to Tulsi Gabbard being confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence.
This afternoon, the Senate voted to confirm Tulsi Gabbard as the new Director of National Intelligence. The final tally was 52-48, with all Democrats voting in opposition, while Senator Mitch McConnell was the only Republican who voted no. And in a sharp statement that he released after the vote, the former leader of the Republican Party said this, quote, "The Senate's power of advice and consent is not an option. It is an obligation, and one we cannot pretend to misunderstand. The nation should not have to worry that the intelligence assessments the president receives are tainted by a Director of National Intelligence with a history of alarming lapses in judgment." Adding, quote, "Edward Snowden's treasonous betrayal of the United States and its most sensitive law intelligence activities endangered sources, methods, and lives. Japan is among America's closest treaty allies in the Indo-Pacific, and the risk of conflict in the region is the product of Chinese aggression, not Western threat inflation. Russia's escalation of its unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine threatens American interests and is solely the responsibility of Vladimir Putin. Entrusting the coordination of the intelligence community to someone who struggles to acknowledge these facts is an unnecessary risk." Jake Sherman's still with us. That is pretty sharp from Mitch McConnell.
AKA, she's not a neocon, right? That is what Mitch McConnell's issue is, right? She doesn't go along with, the standard status quo of the military-industrial complex that has such a tight grip on our politics and our politicians, right?
That's right. Make sure you hit the like button and that you are subscribed, please. So I do believe, let's talk about that. How many of you think we should have an age limit in Senate and Congress? I absolutely do. Do you guys know that there are people in their mid 80s to 90s holding congressional seats? They come with walkers, folks. Now, my parents are in their 80s, okay? A lot of you follow my dad on YouTube at Paw Sammy, Sammy, and Allie, Alybug, Allybug, and he's brilliant. But let me explain everything to you guys. My parents are slowing down, okay? They don't have the energy they used to have. You can't tell me that these people can put the energy into running our country that needs to be put.
Tonight for the health of Republican Senator Mitch McConnell.
How are you feeling, Leader
It's
McConnell?
ridiculous.
In video shot by CNN, the 82-year-old former Senate Majority Leader in a wheelchair lifted up by an aide
Wheelchairs?
waiting car outside the Capitol complex Monday night after 2 falls there just last week. His team said the wheelchair was just a precaution. Those falls, the latest in a growing list of concerning health moments. But McConnell is just one of several lawmakers whose age is raising questions about how old is too old to serve. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, now a backbencher, still represents her San Francisco district at 84. They're both more than 40 years older than their median constituents. And they're not alone. 86-year-old Congresswoman Maxine Waters is a full 50 years older than the median resident in her southern LA district. And Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, the oldest senator still serving at 91, has almost 52 years on the median Hawkeye stater.
Unfortunately, I think that the motivation to stay in office in advanced age, past the retirement age, past where we see most people working, is to maintain power and all the benefits that come with it.
The Pew Research Center found that nearly 4 in 5 Americans want age limits on DC officials, and almost 90% want congressional term limits.
So Ryan, let's start where your piece leaves off and the possibility of putting either age or term limits on lawmakers. How would that work?
Well, it would be extraordinarily difficult, Tom. It
would require Congress to agree to it, and we know that they're not going to. So somebody asked in comments, but Trump's 78, but Trump has a limit on his term. He can only serve 4 years. That's 2 terms. He cannot run again. Imagine these people get in here and they stay. They never leave. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing, guys. They don't even show you half the time that these people lose their train of thought or drool on themselves or don't even show up. They don't even show up for votes anymore. It's ridiculous. Do the job we put you in office to do.
Spending stupid. A national scandal.
And here's something I didn't know. I did not know that Europeans are starting to dig into where their money is being spent, much like what's happening in America. And they're pissed. Come to find out, Great Britain is blowing money on leftist woke nonsense, just like America. But let me tell you guys something. When I heard this, I was so shocked because it felt like I was doing deja vu. You see what I'm saying? Like, how can they be auditing their government at the same time that we're auditing our government? I don't know. I just know it gave me the EBGBs when I heard this.
A national scandal. British taxpayers are sending billions of pounds abroad to pointless woke projects while we're told there's a £22 billion black hole. What I'm about to tell you paints a picture of, in my view, government-sponsored fraud, corruption and waste that spans decades. Are you ready? You sent £1.4 billion to refurbish the High Commission in Nairobi. This included replacing lighting and their fire alarms. Does that sound like value for money to you? You spent £15.5 million to set up climate-smart jobs in Uganda. There is 133 grand to monitor the Afghan Taliban's narcotics ban, £50,000 to study the health of shrimps in Bangladesh. You spent 25 million quid to support green urban growth in Somalia. Shall we just check with Somalia, do we think, and see how they're getting on with your money?
Somalia's president says the death toll has risen to at least 100 after 2 car bombs hit the capital, Mogadishu.
What are they going to do with that? Fight the jihadis off by planting a few trees? Are they? It's 25 million quid's worth of your money that's just been blown up, isn't it? You sent 15 brand new electric Porsche sports cars to Albania so they could use them for their prison service. Then there's 22.5 million on green growth in Nepal. Nepal. I mean, if only there was more, I don't know, rural landscape in Nepal. Yep, I think we can all agree that we should all pay our fair share towards green growth over there. £264,000 combating disinformation in Ethiopia. I mean, what will they discover there? Maybe there wasn't a famine. You know, maybe it was all just a big con by Oxfam, although to be fair, it would be the worst thing Oxfam has done. And then there's 8.6 million quid supporting renewable energy in Indonesia. Well, let's look a little bit closer to home now, shall we? Whilst pensioners freeze to death, people can't afford to have kids or afford to live in a squalid bedsit in Slough, we are handing over tens of millions of pounds to so-called academics to study meaningless tosh. The government spent 200 grand researching the impact of Star Wars on the environment. 502 winter fuel payments for pensioners, that would be roughly 194k researching gay pig masculinities, which resulted in a film called Oink, which I am told by my producers I am not allowed to show you on account of the fact that it's far too graphic. So you spent 200 grand to not be able to see this stuff. Anyway, that's money well spent, isn't it? £407,000 researching gender-based and racialised violence in Ecuador. £311,000 so the University of Leicester can research indigenous film ecologies in India. 842 grand researching the Europe that gay porn built. Fantastic. So I present this show to you tonight, sitting on the foundations of gay porn. Remarkable, isn't it? And then there's the money that gets gobbled up by the public sector. You paid 19.5 million quid for Transport for London to move office. And then you paid 60 million quid so their staff can get into work even when the transport system is disrupted. Now, forgive me, but are they not the ones causing that disruption? We spent £1 billion for asylum accommodation and support in the northwest of England. So again, can you imagine what places like Bolton or Blackpool or Bootle could do with 1 billion quid if we helped to regenerate their local areas? No, I mean, it goes entirely towards looking
So do you guys understand what I mean when I said that it felt like deja vu? I feel like I'm missing something here. I'll pray about it. The Holy Spirit will connect the dots for me. Okay, so let me explain to you about grants. I don't write grants for other people. Second, if you want to write federal grants, let me explain to you. If you're not a nonprofit, there's only about 1% available for for-profit small businesses. 2, if you're going to, it depends on what you want grants for. I don't do grants for people. I have videos out explaining to you how to get your form number, how to get your sam.gov number, how to become an agro-tourism business, all that, all those videos are available under the different playlists that I have. Willow Fairy, I do understand that you guys are in big trouble. I'm watching it. But who is doing your audit? Why are they finding this stuff now? Because Doge isn't doing your audit. Okay. Yeah, there's a big problem. There's something very wrong. I don't know, you guys. Let me show you this for my European people.
Stupid agendas and ordinary folk being unable to survive. Go and check this procurement files out. It is an amazing, amazing account. I've even seen people like Dominic Cummings, whether you like him or not, retweeting some of this stuff, but you can go and find it on the .gov website. This isn't some conspiracy theory. This is there in the open. So go and have a play around with it. Just type in anything you want, and you will find contracts that the government have been paying for some of the most ridiculous things, like 15 electric Porsches for the Romanian government, for their green proposal, anti-climate, all this kind of shit. I'm telling you something, the world is waking up. Now,
Go and have a play around on the website.
The world is waking up. Hold on.
Claimed asylum, came here from Cuba because they said their lives were in danger in Cuba. So they claimed asylum. Cuba has special laws in place with America. So after you've been here for 1 year, you get a permanent resident card. You don't have to go through a bunch of hoops to get it. You get it really quick. Problem is, their data is completely tracked. And you know what they all did? They all went home. They all went back to, after they got their permanent resident card, they all flew back to Cuba to visit mom, dad, Theo.
All right, really in danger.
Everybody. And it's all been tracked. And that's why these 50,000 people almost from Cuba have just put the radar on the fact that people are coming here, claiming asylum, and then flying back to their country. And this is what angers so many people from other countries, because they know now that this data has been released, that all their trips have been tracked. And they've gone back to their countries. And the huge spotlight that has just been put on people with permanent resident cards that claimed asylum but went back to their homes. And they're saying, why couldn't you just do it right? Why couldn't you just not go? Some of us did it right. Some of us came here, enjoy the freedoms America gives us. And we've had grandparents pass. We've had parents, sisters, brothers in our country pass. And we don't go back because we won't risk what we have here in America. And the people in our country understand that. We were fortunate to get here, and we're going to try our best to stay here. But they're afraid that that's putting a huge spotlight on the whole asylum thing. And will it happen to other countries? Will they get the spotlight put on them too? Because some of their people are doing the same thing the Cubans just got caught for.
Yes. So what he's saying is that a lot of these people are coming here and claiming asylum, that, you know, their lives are in danger. But as soon as they get their permanent residency card, they fly back home multiple times. So you're not in danger. You lied. So all that's going to get scrapped underneath Trump. We're going to get rid of all that nonsense and all these illegals that shouldn't be here from Cuba and Somalia. It's going to stop. Thank you, God. No, grants are not dangerous. I have been a recipient of state and federal grants. They are not dangerous. They're amazing. The shame of it is I have also been basically told I couldn't have a grant or be the recipient of a grant because I was not LGBTQ, because I was not Black, because I was not Spanish, because I was a legal, white, married woman. So I'm glad to see all that BS going, because I'm a dang good farmer who has a track record of a zero debt farm. My farmstead has no debt. I only have profit. So if I can do that, everybody can do it. It takes hard work. I have proven myself, and for me to be overlooked for grant money to give it to somebody because they're non-binary or they consider themselves a puppy today, they have a mental illness. No, I'm done with that crap. Give it to people who deserve it. Otherwise, it's wasted money. It is bad in Europe right now. That is why J.D. Vance got up and basically spanked the bottom of the European Union yesterday. So, and if you haven't seen that another person, another illegal alien driving a vehicle ran into a bunch of Germans and killed innocent people again. Remember, they had the Christmas. It happened at Christmas, and now it happened again. You wonder why all these Germans are rioting, the Irish are rioting. You're not going to see it on mainstream media. You've got to go digging for it. These countries are overrun by Muslims and other third world countries, and they're killing, raping, and kidnapping their people. It's bad. It's really, really bad. So let me see if there's anything else I wanted to show you guys real quick, and then I need to run. I've got some stuff to do. Oh, I don't know if this is true. Haven't had a chance to look it up. They said they're putting up a statue of Jesus outside the White House. I don't know.
The case that the Department of Justice was going to provide a new superseding indictment to add to the charges against Eric Adams, alleging he lied or misled the FBI. And she reveals in her letter to the Attorney General that there was a quid pro quo offered by Eric Adams' attorneys to the Department of Justice, promising help on immigration matters for the Trump administration if they dropped the case. Eric Adams' defense attorneys have denied that accusation, but that's not all. A second and third acting Department of Justice official have both stood down also, as the Department of Justice tried to hand them the matter of USA versus Eric Adams. 3 people all gone from the department over this issue. And Bob, as the courthouse closed in Manhattan late today, the case against Eric Adams is still there, has not yet been dismissed. Nope.
So basically what they're talking about there is Eric Adams had charges brought against him. Now they're insinuating that he made a deal with Trump's team to get rid of all the illegal immigrants in New York, not to be prosecuted. And I think there's going to be some stuff there, you guys. I think he's dirty, but I think he's going to walk free because he's going to give them what they wanted. And that's not how the Justice Department should work. I'm just saying. I'm not really down with that, but that's me.
Get any more pissed about where our money has been going.
Overseas.
Then you find out that $2.7 trillion went overseas for Medicare and Medicaid. But people that actually...
That should make everybody angry. One of America's largest expenditures, when you look at what the federal government spends money on, is Medicare and Medicaid. My parents are in their 80s. When my dad was hospitalized from a tree falling on him, his deductible was $10,000. It's ridiculous that my parents, who worked their whole lives, have to pay $40 on medication on a fixed Social Security income, which they also pay taxes on. Go Democrats.
Administration with the rest if funding was not restored to U.S. aid, previously likened Trump's first term to the Civil War, and Jim Crone compared Trump to a tyrant in 2021 video footage uncovered by Natalie G. Winters. Judge McConnell is an activist who has no business sitting in judgment of the president or his administration. Take a look.
What's happened over the last 4 years or so, and at other times in our country's history, going back to, the Civil War and Reconstruction and during the last 4 years, is that the values that we live by, the constitutional values that form the basis of our country, have been tested. And our institutions have been tested in ways that I don't think a lot of folks thought would survive. It got tested in the 1800s by a war, and we survived the war, sometimes well and sometimes not so well, but that's for another story. So what we saw the last 4 years, in my mind, was a new testing of it. And how I think about it is, it's like a balloon, and you're blowing up a balloon, and you keep pushing that air in. Well, at some point, the balloon's going to pop. And it feels like over the last 4 years, with the challenges that have occurred to the rule of law in this country, that we came very close to that balloon popping, where courts stand and enforce the rule of law that is against arbitrary and capricious actions by what could be a tyrant or could be whatnot. We saw plenty of examples of that recently. It enforces our values. Our values, in a legal sense, the Constitution. And we saw, and there are plenty of examples over history, and there's plenty of examples over the last 4 years through government actions. When you're sentencing someone, when we talk about sentencing, that you have to take a moment and realize that this, middle-class, white, male, privileged person needs to understand the human being that comes before us, that maybe a woman, and maybe black, maybe transgender, maybe poor, maybe rich, maybe whatever, may have experiences that aren't yours, and you have to walk in their shoes and understand that the law applies to them where they are.
No.
And then you have to apply the law accordingly.
I mean, come on. What kind of joke, what kind of absurdity is this? I mean, just based on his own words there, it's pretty obvious that this judge should have recused himself from this case, and he knows that. He also probably knows that what he's doing is unconstitutional. He knows that executive authority is not his to block, but clearly he doesn't care because he's not a real judge. He's a Democrat activist who's participating in the resistance against the authoritarian Trump regime. In other words, he's living in frickin' Democrat delusion. And so clearly, once again, we're in one of those situations where the left, along with their propaganda shill actors in the mainstream media, were right, but for the wrong reasons once again. I guess we are in a constitutional crisis, just not for the reason that Democrats are suggesting. No, quite the opposite. This judge and these activist judges that are attempting to block and sabotage Donald Trump in their resistance efforts, they are the face of the real constitutional crisis. CNN's Scott Jennings actually nailed it in this clip.
Well, I think there's a difference between saying whether you're complying with the law and then you have these individual district court judges setting effectively broad federal policy that is specifically reserved for the president of the United States. I think we do have a constitutional crisis, and it's being caused by these judges. They're not here to tell us. They're not here to tell us how to spend the money. They're not here to set broad federal policy. That is the president's job as elected by the people. These judges are supposed to be settling discrete, specific matters, not policy setting. I think Vance is right. I think Trump has a point, and these judges want nothing more to continue the lawfare.
I think he's absolutely right. Just as we covered in a previous video, these judges do not have the power to wield executive authority. It's so blatantly obvious what's going on here. Simply what's happening is the bureaucratic regime are reacting like white blood cells in their effort to protect the corrupt Washington body. I don't see the justification.
Okay, so I did a video. Judges do have the right to question. They can file what they want. Here's the thing. It's going to go all the way up to Supreme Court, and it's going to be null and void. We know Soros stacked courts across America. He's been doing this for a while, using your money through U.S. aid. So we are going to have to fight these people all the way up. It's going to be okay. We are going to win. It is just all part of it. Whether we agree with it or not, we have to see it through, guys. We have to see it through.
The suck job on that one. Here they are talking about how they would want to pack the Supreme Court because it wasn't doing exactly what they wanted.
There has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that we, the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But do we want to live in a world where a government can decide to ignore a federal court?
Well, no, of course. I mean, I do think that it raises these important questions.
Again, it's worth repeating. A judge has never overruled the FDA on these grounds. There are some members of Congress who have suggested that President Biden and other leaders should ignore the ruling. I certainly understand the sentiment, but do you think that is a viable path forward?
This court has lost legitimacy. They have burned whatever legitimacy they may still have had after their gun decision, after their voting decision, after their union decision. They just took the last of it and set a torch to it with the Roe versus Wade opinion. I believe we need to get some confidence back in our court, and that means we need more justices on the United States Supreme Court.
Do you guys get the level of hypocrisy here? I know calling out hypocrisy doesn't really get you anywhere, but it's absolutely extraordinary. AOC said they rely on the legitimacy of their ruling. So what she's basically saying there is if they don't rule the way I want, they're not legit. Elizabeth Warren, they've set fire to the Constitution. It's like, lady, yes, they did reverse Roe v. Wade, but abortion is obviously not a federally guaranteed right, so everything gets kicked back to the states. Now, you may not like that, or you do like it, or it doesn't even matter what your feelings on abortion are. We know she loves abortion. There is no one that loves killing unborn babies more than Elizabeth Warren. We have to accept that. It's a weird lady. Maybe it has something to do with her fake Indian roots. There's a guilt thing there. Who knows? But when they don't like what's going on, that actually, you want to talk about a constitutional crisis? A constitutional crisis is when you guys, members of Congress and members of the Senate, are trying to fundamentally alter the judicial branch by packing the courts with your activists. That is a constitutional crisis. It's not a constitutional crisis when Donald Trump is asked, hey, we're uncovering fraud here. Would you be willing to take this to Congress and get them to deal with some of the tightening of the purse strings? That's not a constitutional crisis. That's literally exactly how it's supposed to work.
Yes, it is. So I think it's funny to me when you see videos of the Democrats from 3-4 years ago crying. I told you guys, Republicans fought Biden's administration to a standstill. We filed suit after suit after suit against them. And we won most of them. And the Democrats had a fit. Well, they're now trying to do the same thing to Trump. Let it play out. Don't let them get in your head. It is the dying of the Hydra. We're cutting one head off at a time. It's not going to be pretty. It's very annoying. You know, I mean, people like Elizabeth Warren, those people, AOC, that's hilarious. Let me tell you guys, she better be careful with Tom Hooman. He has already reached out to the Department of Justice to have them look into her. No, I'm not, Jesse. We don't do, look, let me tell you something. If you can't handle the world calling her fake Pocahontas, then you're going to have to suck it up because the whole world does. Y'all got to stop being offended by everything. People can't even have conversations anymore because everybody wants to go to their corner and cry because you got offended. Stop. Adults can have conversations without having to be careful that we might offend everybody. No, she's not. She's fake Pocahontas. That's what we call her. She has no Indian blood, but she claimed it. Now you have to watch your enemy so you know what they're doing. Yeah, there are no safe zones here. No safe zones on Sam's channel. We're going to talk about it like it's real and it's happening. And if you can't handle that, there are a million content creators that you can go watch. Okay. Love you guys with all my heart. Thank you, Miss Betsy. She said, doesn't offend her. Love you guys. Be safe. Keep your head on a swivel. We'll be back tomorrow with a bunch more of craziness going on in this world. All my European people, reach out to me through Facebook Messenger and let me know what's going on in Europe so we can report it truthfully here, okay? God bless you guys. Stay safe. Make sure you hit the like button and you're subscribed. Good night. Goodbye. Love you.